Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Peter Winnick. I'm the founder and CEO at Thought Leadership Leverage, and you are joining us on the podcast, which is Leveraging Thought Leadership. Today, my guest is Greg Satell. He is the co-founder of Change OS, a transformation and change advisory. He's an international keynote speaker. He's the host of a cool podcast, which is the Changemaker Mindset podcast, and the best-selling author of Cascades: How to Create a Movement That Drives Transformational Change. And his book prior to that was Mapping Innovation. He's also a guest lecturer at Wharton and has contributed to 50 HBR articles, so a classic underachiever. And I could sit here and tell you more and more about him, but I'd rather just talk to Greg. So welcome aboard, Greg.
Good to see you, Peter.
So tell me a little bit about your journey. How did all this happen? How'd you get here? Because it's an interesting story, and is in most cases it's not a typical linear thing.
Yeah, not at all. I started off working in media in New York. I was selling national radio, and I got this offer to go work in Poland, selling ad space there. So I'd been an athlete in college. I was a wrestler in college,
Right.
and so I'd never been able to do a semester abroad. And I figured, well, the guy in the office next to me, is a little older, makes a little bit more money, and has a longer commute. Other than that, he's pretty much doing the same thing I'm doing.
Right.
So
Right.
I might as well. I'll go out there for 6 months and have a little bit of adventure and you know.
Well, no, let me get this. Like, certain markets are always thought to be the hot market. You go to Miami or Austin, whatever. Was Poland on the dream list of where to go to sell radio advertising back in the day? Did I miss
No,
it?
it was actually it was a bunch of business journals that
Okay.
two American guys started after the fall of the Berlin Wall. They started a
Oh,
couple of years earlier, and so the options were they had business journals in Prague, in Budapest, and in
okay.
Warsaw. And out of the three, Warsaw was probably my fourth choice.
So you got your fourth choice.
I
Okay.
got my fourth choice, and I got there, and I just loved it. From almost the first day, it was so exciting, and I didn't realize how lucky I was to go to Poland, because Poland is by far, I mean, today, anybody who's spent any time in Europe knows that Poland is essentially the capital of Eastern Europe.
Yeah.
It is by far the biggest country, by far the biggest economy, and the the level of competition there is the level of professionalism is quite high, even by European standards. When you
Mm-hmm.
go to Warsaw, you need to feel like you're going to Frankfurt or to
Yeah.
London. You're
So
not
you
going.
go there for 6 months, and then you stay there. Well, you go there thinking this will be
Then here I am at this moment in history where everything is changing and everybody knew it. I mean, you have an entire country being rebuilt from from the Marriott Hotel.
very
There was
cool.
no Class A office space. So any company that wanted to start a business there, and we're talking about pretty much every Fortune 500 company, they the only place they could go, they would send executives, they would stay in the Marriott, they would get an office at the Regis Center,
Right.
which, for those of you who don't know, that was WeWork before Silicon Valley
Right.
got hold of it.
Right.
And so you would eat in the Marriott, you would eat at their restaurants, you'd go to the fitness club there, and you go to
Right.
the nightclub. And everybody you needed to do business was doing the same thing. So
That's pretty easy. Okay. So you stay there, and then where does the seeds or the birth of Greg, the thought leader, the author, the academic, the Cascade guy, how did that
So I
blossom?
ended up staying there 15 years, 6 in Poland, 8 on and off in Ukraine, and a little bit in Russia, a little bit in Istanbul.
Okay.
And in 2004, I was leading a major news organization. It was a media company, but one of our biggest businesses was news during
Yes.
the Orange Revolution.
Very cool.
And and that that had a deep impression on me. And it was one of those moments that the universe kind of opens itself up
Sure.
and, and reveals a bit of itself to you. And what I realized was his power didn't work the way I thought it did.
Right.
Here you were in a situation with nobody with any conventional form of power and any ability to shape events at all. There was just this mysterious force that was moving things along. And I remember even then thinking, I'd like to bottle that force somehow, right?
Okay.
Uh, you know, here I was running, organization of 800
But
people.
geopolitically and in the historical perspective, you're at a moment in time, at a place in time where things pretty special are going on,
Yeah.
and you're looking at, like, you're kind of deconstructing how does this happen, right? Like, kind of as you're watching it happen.
No, I wasn't deconstructing.
Okay.
I was just like everybody else, blindsided, like,
Okay.
what the hell just happened? I had no idea. I just knew there was something there. I couldn't describe it. Everybody did. I mean, you can't be there without feeling
Sure.
what that was. And it was like nothing I'd ever experienced before. Even, you know, I'd been in the region, what was it? That was 2000, like 7 years at that time. So I was fluent in the languages of the culture. I'd seen
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
a lot of upheaval, but nothing like this. And I had this thought, like, what if I could bottle this force and put it to some useful purpose?
Mhm.
I was running a 800-person company and, you know, young, bright people, all with their own ideas. How do I get them all going in the same direction on what the things I think need to be priority? Had no idea how to do that. 2 years later, I'm taking a publishing course out at Stanford. I'm in Silicon Valley for a few weeks. Everybody's talking about social network. And that's when Facebook was just,
Yep.
really, becoming a thing, and we also had a very big digital business, so I said, "This is something I should really learn about." So I started researching network science and especially the work of Duncan Watts, and here was a mathematical explanation for almost everything that happened during the Orange Revolution. So now I was hooked, and I started researching deeper about movements, about social networks. And then when the world was blowing up in 2009 and we sold our
Right.
business to Petro Poroshenko, who would become the president of Ukraine, I was looking around for something to do. So while I did that, I started my blog. And then that took
What?
off and got picked up by Forbes and Harvard Business Review. And eventually I came back here. And this whole time now starting to write about it and try and put my these experiences into some coherent form. While I'm doing that, I meet this guy, Serja Popovich, who was the architect
Right.
of the color revolutions. He led the movement that overthrew Milosevic and then trained the guys in the Rose Revolution in Georgia and then the Orange Revolution.
Right.
And
Right.
he had built this
No.
and more than 50 countries since then, and he's become a close friend. And he had built this repeatable model for overthrowing a country. And I did quite a bit of organizational transformation when I was in 15 years of Eastern Europe. And
Right.
I said, this seems to me like it would be a great model for organizational transformation. And
Okay,
that
so now
led to the research that became Cascades.
right, so you took what you were observing, right? You were living it, you're observing it, you're part of it, it's there, and then you make that bridge because this is where that the interesting things happen at the seams, right? There's geopolitical change,
Right.
as upheaval, this, that, and the other thing, and you're like, "Ah, this actually connects to how organizations go through change and issues and pieces," and that's really when people think of you today, they think of you more as the org cascade guy than the observer of geopolitical revolutionary things.
We're the media guy, we're the publisher, we're
Right,
the
right, right.
or any of those things. But one thing, I try and be very clear about this during in writing the book. In the book, I had no idea. There wasn't this moment of epiphany where a light
Yeah.
went on. There was just this feeling of extreme confusion about something that happened that I knew was important, but I had no idea how to make sense of it, much less communicate to others. And that was a very, very long, hard process.
Right. If you're enjoying this episode of Leveraging Thought Leadership, please make sure to subscribe. If you'd like to help spread the word about our podcast, please leave a 5-star review at ratethispodcast.com/LTL and share it with your friends. We're available on Apple Podcasts and on all major listening apps, as well as at thoughtleadershipleverage.com/podcast. So now organizations are bringing you in so fill in the blank. I get paid to do X for Y. Like, who's bringing you in to get what done based
So
on?
they're bringing me in to help them build a change strategy around an initiative that's important to their business.
Okay.
Whether that is a cultural change or a technology change, often I partner with other thought leaders.
Okay. Is this a new variation on change management, or is it
So
different?
change management is much different, and this is when you're talking about change management and methodologies like ADKAR or CODIC,
Yeah.
you're really talking about internal communication and training. You're talking about solving a communication and coordination problem. Here's a change; it's going to happen. That decision's been made. Um, you know, I always say the classic one is at Intel when they made that famous move out of memory chips.
Yeah.
If the CEO says our factories are changing over, that's going to happen. It doesn't matter what anybody thinks about it, right? But
Yeah.
most of
So
the
they
changes,
burn the boats, right?
yeah, most of the changes, and they have full authority to make the change. But back
Right.
then, back in the 80s, when all these change management, 80s and 90s, really, when these change management methodologies were being uh, designed, uh, there more than 80% of corporate assets were tangible assets. So
Yeah.
most changes were strategic changes. Today, more than 90% of strategic assets, or excuse me, corporate assets are intangible assets, know-how, licenses. So when we talk about change today, we're talking about change. It changes in what people think and what they do. And
Right. You're not
those types of
optimizing.
changes require collective action, and they're very sensitive to resistance,
Right. So you're not
and that's why they often fail.
a factory where you have control over the hardware. This is really the software, if you will, where you're going to get the resistance. So when organizations are bringing you in to shepherd them through this, what are the various ways that you do that? There's speaking, advising, coach. Like,
But first of all, day one, we have a tool called the resistance inventory where we analyze that and build strategies and anticipate from day one where that resistance is going to come from.
okay,
Because that's something that usually, to be honest, almost never gets done. And when you look
okay,
at change management methodologies like ADKAR, they don't have a methodology for dealing with resistance. So that's the first.
okay. So you start with the tool, and then what?
Well, then there's a suite of tools. So we have one for resistance, one for cultural triggers, one for stakeholder analysis. Almost all of it built on this original methodology designed, thought up by a guy named Gene Sharp, and then put into practice by Sir John.
It's not dependent on you specifically. The tools could be administered by others. So there's some scale and leverage built into the model, right?
Yes.
That there are
And
others that could deploy these tools.
right. And usually I'm partnering with another thought leader. So for instance, I have one friend who does gender intelligence, right?
Okay.
So she generally gets hired when a big corporation gets sued, quite
Yep.
frankly,
Right.
or they
Something
have a
bad
high,
happened.
or have some high profile
People
people.
rob. Right.
Right. So she comes and she has a great methodology, great assessment tool, and she comes and helps them fix the problem. And then 5 years later, they call her again because because it never took hold, right? They solved the
Yeah.
problem and it went back. The
Oops.
best indicator of things that we think and do are what the people around us think and do. So even if somebody's convinced, once they get back embedded in those networks, they're going to get convinced right back. This is a frustration among a lot of successful thought leaders is they go in, they help people understand the changes they need to make. Some initial successes are done, but a year or two later, they're right back where they started.
Yeah, so stay there for a minute because that to me is the issue of sustainability, right? Because it's one
Yep.
skill set to come in and say, I can go in, roll up my sleeves, be a good consultant, diagnose the problem, put together a slick report, talk to management, senior leadership around, here's the problem, here's the data to support it quantitatively, qualitatively. Senior leadership goes, okay, cool. I see it's a problem. Help me fix it. And then you say, well, here's what we're going to do first, right? That's 6 months, a year, or whatever. And then we go our separate ways. But that sustainability piece, if you're not changing capabilities, if you're not changing culture, if you're not changing a whole bunch of other things, guess what? Like you said, whether it's 2 years, 5 years, whatever, the weeds are going to come back up, right?
Yes, and here we have this huge problem at this one division. Let's go in, we fix the problem, big success. That guy gets hired away.
Right.
And then it goes back, and the rest of the company, the rest of the organization never got touched
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
because that was just the problem with the guy in the Northeast or something like that.
Who's now working at your competitor or whatever the case may be.
Exactly.
So I think a lot of thought leaders miss the opportunity to work backwards and say, I'm going to develop a set of an extension of my thought leadership that deals with the sustainability piece, because that's really, I think most senior leaders have been through the diagnose the problem, do some consulting, do the front end, and then, ha ha ha, 3, 4 years later, I'll see you in a little bit, right? Like, how do you get to the root?
That and I call it the day after agile training.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Where you're going and you're training somebody, you're giving them a skill, you're giving them a tool, right? And you're a thought leader, and that's great, and it works for them and everything. But they're not being good evangelists because we know what happens the day after agile training. You send that guy super or that girl super enthusiastic. They go and they expect everything to change at once. And then when it doesn't, they get frustrated and then
Right.
all sorts of bad things happen. And this is another reason why I like other thought leaders partner with me is because ideally you want that executive that you've helped to then go be an evangelist for you in that organization
Internally. So, yeah.
internally. So they become
Yeah.
your best salespeople, not the people getting shunned and sort of soiling your bad name just because they're excited about your work.
Well, and at that moment in time inside the organization, they're typically most favored nation, their favorite child. Look at what they did. Look at how they're doing it. So now the other divisions, whether that's functional or geographical, going, wow, so and so over here did some cool stuff. What's going on there? As we start to wrap, Greg, any thoughts or recommendations for others out there that might be on the cusp of saying, yeah, this thought leadership thing, I think I wanna be that. It wouldn't be go to Poland for 6 months and stay for 15 years, I imagine. Like,
No, I think it is the best ideas don't automatically win. It took me 15 years to go from that initial, "Hey, what's that?" to cascades, and even longer to really build it into a practice. So when you have an idea that you're excited about, you need to understand that people are not going to understand and adopt it in the same form in which you came to understand it.
right, right.
And that's how you need to serve, is
Yeah,
building that bridge.
I love that. Well, this has been great. I appreciate your time, and I love the story and the origin story and then the application and the bridging from sort of the geopolitical into the organizational. So thanks for sharing, Greg.
Thanks for having me on.
To learn more about Thought Leadership Leverage, please visit our website at thoughtleadershipleverage.com. To reach me directly, feel free to email me at peter@thoughtleadershipleverage.com.
And please subscribe to Leveraging Thought Leadership on iTunes or your favorite podcast app to get your weekly episode automatically.